My mate Kieran popped round yesterday. I was minding my own business and there was a knock at the door. Open it. There's Kieran. Hello, Kieran. How are you? Yeah, very well. I was just in the area. No, come in. Have a cup of tea. It was nice to catch up with him, actually. There was a thing was that I wanted to ask him a question because he's into computers and IT and data and all that sort of stuff. That's his speciality. And I said, it's interesting because I'd watched this presentation in which it was showing the future, the not so distant future that we're all going to have, being herded into 15-minute cities in order to save the planet because it might implode because of global warming, trying to keep people's, I don't know, their emissions as low as possible. And in order to do that, they would need to just keep an eye on us. And I said also they were revealing in this that they're listening to our phones, recording conversations, should we say the wrong thing, and that there would be smart lampposts positioned in the streets with special lighting so that they can keep a good eye on us with cameras and listening ears, so that this technology was there. They would say, of course, to protect us from all sorts of terrible things, but actually it was to monitor us and make sure that we behaved. And I said, do you think that's possible? Because I read that there was telephones now, the smartphones now can have biometrics in them, that you no longer have to have a number to get past the little security thing, or indeed a little squiggle that some people prefer, but actually it just looks at you and goes, oh, I know who you are, it's safe, you can use the phone. But actually, that's a way of recording your face, the biometrics, and it's being sent somewhere to some HQ so that they know exactly who you are. And I said, do you think that's possible? Are they listening to us in that way? And he thought about it for a moment and then he said, no, I don't think so. I don't think they could do that because where are they going to store the data? Imagine there's about 6 to 7 million people in this country, and if they're recording 24/7 everything that people are walking down all these streets, everybody, and making sure that everybody is saying the right thing, they've got to store the data somewhere for 365 days of a year. Where are they going to do it? It would be a massive amount of data. I don't think they could. So I felt much reassured by this. So anyway, we had our conversation and off he went. But afterwards I thought, yes, but what if we have a system in which they convince us to have a digital ID, which would be just in computer language, a series of ones and noughts, you know, binary language. And then what with 5G scanning left, right and centre, they would only need this one little digit to know where we are, to scan where we are. And we already know that what with all the security cameras and everything else, if you wanted to find somebody, it would take a bit of time, but you could look through all the footage. But with AI being very clever now, it could do a lot of scanning, and presumably all the stuff it doesn't need, it could actually delete. So it only keeps, in terms of data storage, those bits where people have said something that was perhaps a bit dodgy, or that they are aware of somebody who's used their car too many times, or you've eaten too many meat pies. And so it would attach with a central bank digital currency to some sort of social credit, so that then when you wanted to get and fill your car up with petrol or go a certain distance, it says, no, I'm sorry, you can't pay for that because we are going to restrict your payments. So anyway, I thought about that, but even if they couldn't control us, you could imagine in that way, if it wasn't physically possible, you can imagine that people would believe that it was possible because they will tell you that's possible. Perhaps they'll come out with a film. You know, a film will suddenly appear, maybe a remake of 1984 by George Orwell, and it will reinforce the idea that the government, Big Brother, can actually spy on you. People are referring it to all the time. We think that Big Brother is spying on us and listening to us, and maybe they are, maybe they're not, but that's what we believe. And because we believe that, we've enslaved ourselves. And in fact, if we give all the information the government wants to have a digital ID, or to agree to switching over to a central bank digital currency, or even that we want to go towards net zero, what we're saying is that we agree to it. We're giving them our consent, and by doing so, we are thus enslaving ourselves. And so we don't feel that we're free at all. But are we free? That is the question I want to ask. Are we free? Of course we are, unless we consent otherwise. And I don't consent to be enslaved. So I've made some notes here to try and help explain this. So unless we give up and hand over the information and consent to have a digital ID, we then become part of their system. So what happens if you then, you don't comply with it? Well, they'll try and enforce you to do that by sending you bills. You made an infringement. You know what it's like when you park your car somewhere and you're a few minutes late and you go, oh, blimey, I'm a few minutes late, and they've already slapped a ticket on you. Well, what harm has actually taken place? Have you harmed anybody? No, not really. What about when the council tax comes running on your door? It falls on your door, and by the 1st of April, April Fool's Day as it were, it says you've got to pay us this amount of money. And you think to yourself, well, why? Because, I mean, ultimately, the council tax is just actually, well, the council, it's just a tax, isn't it? If the council are asking you to pay, they're just a corporation. They are a corporation, a private corporation, and they're just demanding money, willy-nilly. I mean, it's the same thing as if, say, I don't know, Amazon, that's a corporation, or Netflix, that's another corporation, or let's face it, I don't know, Ben and Jerry's ice cream, that's an American corporation. If they just knocked on your door and said, excuse me, could you give us some money? What would you say to them? Is it, sorry, what for? Oh, well, we're going to do this service and that service for you. Can you just give us some money beforehand? And you say, well, I don't know that I've agreed to this. Have you agreed to the amount of money that you're going to pay in your council tax, or did they just set it and tell you that's what you're going to pay? I don't remember consenting to it, you see. I don't remember actually saying, well, where's the contract then? Where's the agreement, the contract that I have with you, a corporation, to say that I'm going to A, pay you, and B, that you're going to say you're going to do these services? Oh, well, we've sent you a demand and we've told you what we're going to do. Yes, but I don't think I've consented to it. It's not really an agreement, is it? You see, there is something called common law. You may have heard of it. It is actually the most basic thing that we as free people have. Common law. Everybody has to comply with common law, natural law. Then you have statutes and rules and things, legal proceedings, which sit on common law, but isn't common law. They work within it or on top of it, and they presume, of course, that you will obey all their rules and their statutes. But of course, if you don't consent to it, you just rebut it and say it's a presumption. You're presuming I will, but if I rebut it, then it's got nothing to do with me. Thanks very much. I'm abiding by common rule. Now, when I said about this contract from the council tax, for example, and they say, well, we've got the demand, we demand the money. You've got a legal right to do it, and you say, well, hang on a second, I don't mind paying it at all, but where's the contract? Where did I sign with wet ink? Where did I sign? Where's the agreement? And they will struggle there to give you an agreement, because unless you actually have signed an agreement with them, which I haven't, it just comes. It just comes every year, it just comes. And I haven't signed an agreement, so I haven't given them my consent. And the thing about common law is, for any contract to be enforceable, it's got to fit 4 basic principles. And I've written them down here. First principle is there's got to be full disclosure. So when you have a contract, it's got to be full disclosure about what's in the contract. There can't be anything hidden. There's nothing, in the small print that you can't see. Both parties have got to know exactly to the letter what's in the contract. So that's number one. The second one, it's got to have equitable considerations. In other words, that the money value of it, let's say, mostly it's about money, that the equitable value is right. So you might think, just say with council tax, for example, that for them to take the bins, for them to potentially send an ambulance for you, or if your house comes on fire, or that you need the police to come round and look if there was a burglary and stuff, that what you're paying for is about the right value. But also bearing in mind you're paying also for the council, the building, the upkeep, and paying for all the officers who are sitting there. You're paying for their salaries, whether you like it or not, and the cars that they drive and all the other bits and pieces. And you have to think to yourself, is that of equitable value, the rate that they give you? And if you think it is, then that's fair enough. But you may want to negotiate. You may want to say, well, actually, I don't think that what you're charging me there is quite right. I don't really agree to some of the things that you're doing in that. So I don't really want half those services. I don't want to pay that massive, great big wage, that salary that the head honcho there is getting or he's getting. And I don't really want to be paying that much for the police, because if I ring the police and I've been burgled, will they turn up? I don't know. I'm not really trusting any of that anymore. So maybe I want to change the value. It doesn't seem to have the right equitable value to me. But of course, unless that's in the contract, that's common law. You know, you should be able to do that. If it's not, then it becomes null and void. The other thing, of course, the terms have got to be, and the conditions have got to be lawful. And that makes perfect sense, abiding by common law. And the final one, of course, is mutual intent. And that's the important thing. It's got to be that you have mutual intent on both parties, that they've come to you and said, we've got this service, and that you've said, actually, I would like that service. So there's mutual intent. You've both got to agree, basically, to it. Whatever it all is, you've got to agree. And if it's a demand, it just plops through and it says, here, give us some money. This is what we want. You've got a legal right to, you've got a legal responsibility. You've got to have it. That to me isn't an agreement. That doesn't seem to have mutual intent. I never actually asked for it, and you can't provide me with a contract. And so therefore, I can't see that this is anything to do with me. Very thanks. Nice of you to offer, but thanks very much, but no thanks. Cheerio. And that's it. So what then would happen, I suppose, is they get a bit annoyed because you haven't given your consent, and so they'll probably start to hassle you a little bit with demands and things, which to me sounds like menaces. Well, if they're using menaces to extract money from you, again, that becomes against the principles of common law, and it makes that whatever they're asking null and void. It's got nothing to do with you. Where's the contract? You haven't got anything to do with it. So no contract means you haven't consented. So, you know, I haven't consented to that. I haven't consented to the parking ticket that somebody's just whacked on my car. I haven't consented to the fact that they want to take taxes from me at the end of the year, each and every end of the year. I haven't really consented to that. I haven't had a contract with them to say, well, look, if you pay your inland revenue taxes, this is what we'll do for you. Well, where's my contract then with you? You know, I may not actually, I haven't agreed to it because actually you, the government, seem to be spending money on a war. Well, I don't give you the consent to do that, so I'm not sure whether I need to pay my taxes to you, at least not that amount. Let's agree a sum. Let's agree how much I should pay. You're paying reparations to some other country for stuff that happened in the past. That's got nothing to do with me. I'm not sure I agree with that either. It's got to have this mutual consent. It's got to have equitable value. And these things don't. So if they're going around collecting your data and your biometrics and you haven't agreed to it, you haven't given your consent, you haven't agreed to digital IDs, for example, or a central bank digital currency. If you haven't agreed to these things, you haven't agreed to net zero is another one, or a 15-minute city and having everything extracted from you, then I don't give you my consent. Then they can't do anything about it. So, but they'll do it by getting you scared, by making you worried, by using fear that, oh, well, you'll go to prison and all of this if you don't consent. But you just ask them, you've just got to be a bit clever and take back the responsibility for yourself and your own actions and say, well, where's the contract? Where did we agree to this? Because common law trumps the statutes and the rules and the government. It really does. So it's time now. They'll get you by fear, but it's time now that we got them fearful by withdrawing our consent. Because if we don't consent to any of it, what can they do?